Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam. In today's video, we are going to discuss security groups, which act as a firewall for EC2 instances to control incoming and outgoing traffic, which we call the inbound and outbound traffic. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, comment, and share for others to know. See you in the video. Today, we shall be discussing security groups. When you talk of security groups, what does it mean? Now, security group, they act as a virtual firewall, okay, for EC2 instances to control incoming and outgoing traffic. Okay, so they act as virtual firewall, okay, to protect EC2 instances. Security groups protect EC2 instances from incoming and outgoing traffic. Okay, so let's assume this is the user, okay, with a small laptop like that. This is your laptop, and then we have our EC2 instance right here. Okay, when a user makes requests to our web server, the EC2 instance, the incoming request is called inbound traffic. Okay, and the returning traffic, let's say he wants to access your website. Okay, when he types www so and so yahoo.com, gmail.com, and it displays on the screen the outcoming traffic going back to the user is called outbound traffic. So before the inbound traffic could hit the server, there is the security group which acts as a firewall to check whether the traffic coming inside is allowed to enter or not. Okay, so that leads us to the rules of security groups. Okay, so like I said, the first one, it controls incoming and outgoing traffic, which is called the inbound and outbound traffic. So it is the responsibility of the security group to control inbound and outbound traffic to EC2 instances. The next one is that security groups only contain allowed rules. Okay, only contain allowed rules, or they are what we call permissive. Now, what this means is that when an EC2 rule, okay, is found on the list, it means that particular port or that particular port has been allowed to be there. Okay, it has been allowed. If a particular port doesn't find its way on the list, what it means is that it has been denied. So you can't say that, okay, let me allow this port to be on the list, then I will deny it on the list. No, it doesn't work. Once a particular port is open and it finds its way on the list, it is allowed. Okay, you cannot deny it whilst it finds its way on the list. The third one is that you filter traffic by protocol and port numbers. Now you can allow inbound or outbound on EC2 by using either the protocol and the port numbers, either of them or both of them. Okay, if you allow a certain port number, you can filter by the protocol or the port number. When we get to the demo, you understand it much better. The next one is that security groups are stateful. Security groups are stateful. Now, what this one means is that if the EC2 makes a request, okay, let's say you have an EC2, you have your application running on it, you've installed a server, okay, maybe Ubuntu, and then you want this particular Ubuntu to get updates and then update the packages. Okay, now when the request leaves your EC2, let's say to contact Ubuntu servers, okay, for updates or for patches, this request, when it goes to fetch the request for the updates and it's coming back, okay, it is automatically allowed. Any port that is open on the EC2, when it goes out and comes back in, it is allowed. That is what we call stateful. Now, for instance, if you and your kid, let's say a cinema, Okay, now your child tells you he's going to pee and that he'll be back. When he leaves the cinema hall to pee, when he's done and he's coming, the security man doesn't check his ticket anymore, or he doesn't say that okay, the place is full so you cannot enter. Okay, that is how stateful is. Once you've been allowed in, if you go out, you can still come back. Okay, so if an EC2 initiates a request going at, if it's returning, it is allowed. It doesn't check again and say that okay, you are new, so we have to check you. Once that port is already inside, allowed inside, when it goes out and comes back, it is allowed. The next thing is that by default, all outbound traffic is allowed. By default, all outbound traffic is allowed. So if you open, let's say port 22, which is SSH, okay, it is allowed to exit the EC2 by default. When you launch an EC2 instance fresh, okay, by default, all outbound traffics are allowed to move out unless you change it, or unless you update it or edit it such that all outbound cannot go out. But then if you install fresh EC2 instances, all outbound traffic are allowed. Now let's go to some important ports that you should know. So port 22 is for SSH. Okay, this one, it allows you to have access or log into Linux instances. When you spin up a Linux instance, port 22 is allowed. SSH is allowed for you to log into a Linux machine. Another port 33389 RDP, meaning that it's remote desktop protocol. Now this one allows you to log into Windows instances. When you spin up a Windows instance, Windows server, you will need RDP protocol allowed on EC2 instance and in the security group before you can be able to access a Windows instance. Okay, the next one, we have port 21, which is file transfer protocol, file transport protocol. Sorry, this one helps you to upload files to a shared storage. Okay, port 22 again can be used for SFTP. This one is secured FTP. Okay, this one allows you to upload files using SSH. Likewise, SCP. Okay, these are all secure copy. It uses port 22. Then we have port 80. This one is an HTTP protocol. This one, it gives you access to unsecure website. This one is quite common. If you see on your browser, okay, without the padlock, it's running on port 80, which allows you to access unsecure websites. Then we have port 443. This one is also HTTP. This one gives you access to secured websites. All of these ports have to be allowed on your EC2 security group before you can be able to access them. Before any request coming in with any of these ports can be allowed. Now, some of the ports, we have 3306, which is my SQL database. Before my SQL database can communicate with your EC2 instance or your web server or your application server, it should be allowed. This port should be opened such that the EC2 can have access, or incoming traffic can flow from the application to my SQL database. We have port 80, port 8080, which is what? Common web proxy. Okay, so there are so many other ports that you need to allow. If you don't need them, you don't allow them, but if you need them, you allow them to access your EC2 instances. Okay, now let's head over to our EC2 console and then do a demo of it. Logging into your AWS console, then you go to instances, click on launch instances. Let's give it a name. If you don't know how to create an EC2 instance, check the previous video. I've made a video on how to create an instance. Okay, now let's name our instance test, or let's do it cloud test, cloud tech. We are going to use the Ubuntu T2 micro, should be fine for us, free tier. Then we have to create a key pair. Key pair, we can use the previous one that we have, or we can create a new one. So you can decide to create a new one. Okay, so create new. Let's call it cloud tech dash test. We are choosing RSA. Click on keep create key pair. Okay, so it's created for us. Then we make sure that we allow SSH, because this is how we can be able to log into our instance. Click on launch instance. Okay. Now it's still pending, so let's wait for a while to see. Still pending. Okay, so now it's running. Let's go to our EC2 instance. Now this is our IP address. So if you want to check our security group, click on security. Okay. Let's go back to our instance. And go to security. You click on SG, this one. Okay. So as you can see, it's only allowed port 22. Click on edit inbound rules. Now in the inbound rule, it's only allowed SSH. Okay, so when I was explaining the rules to you, if that particular rule is not found on the list as in here, it means that it is denied. If it's found on the list, it means that it is allowed. You cannot deny a rule on the list. No, you can't deny a rule on the list. Once it's found its way to the list, it means that you are allowing it. Okay, so this one means that SSH for port 22 from anywhere, you can access it from anywhere. Now if I want to restrict this from anywhere or any machine to a specific machine, let's say my IP address, I just have to take this one off and then put my specific IP address over there. Okay, so when you have this, it means that it is only this IP address that can access our EC2 instance using SSH. Apart from that, nothing will work. Okay, so let's try an example. Let me take this one off. Let me just cancel it. Okay, now let's try an example to see if we can be able to allow or test if some other traffic can enter our EC2 instance. Okay, so where is our EC2? Let's open. Let me copy this IP address. Let's say we want to allow port 80. HTTP. What is our IP address? Hold on. Okay, so as it is now, it's not able to access our AC2 port 80 is not able to access our AC2. Okay, now let's connect to our instance and install a web server and see whether we can be able to allow it. So we go to our terminal. Okay, to log in. So we have to locate where our key pair file is. Okay, the PEM file is in my downloads folder. Then I give it permission. Oh, sorry. Okay, so now we log in into our EC2 instance. Our username for default username for Ubuntu machine is Ubuntu. Then our IP address, okay, the public IP address for our EC2 instance. Okay, so now we've been able to access our EC2 instance. Now the first thing you're supposed to do is always update your packages when you install or spin up an EC2 instance. Okay, so let me clear the screen. Okay, so now once we've able to update our packages, we now want to install Apache, which is a web server. A web server is software that would allow HTTP request onto your server. Okay, so we install Apache. Okay, so let's test if this service is running. Okay, the service, Apache service, is up and running. Okay, now let's refresh this. It will still not go through. It's still not going through. Okay, so we need to allow that port into our instance by updating our security group. Okay, so let's go to security. So we add a rule, custom CTP. We want to allow port 80. Remember when we were discussing, we said port 80 gives you access to unsecured website. Okay, so where we are allowing anywhere any IP address at all can come in. Of course, when you're on the production level, you wouldn't want to allow anything or everything to enter your server. Okay, so you need to restrict it, but for testing purposes, that is why we are doing this. So we click on save, and then let's go back and refresh this one. Okay, it has automatically appeared by itself. So it means that once we allow port 80, okay, once we allowed port 80, it is working. Now when you go back and disable it or take it off, let's delete it. Now immediately you update the security group, you don't need to restart the server. It automatically saves everything and then it takes effect. So when we refresh it now, see, it is struggling. Okay, now the last thing we'll discuss is the outbound rules. Now on the outbound rules, you realize that all traffic is being allowed out. Like I said, by default, every traffic is allowed to exit. Okay, so it is up to you, the solutions architect, to change this, because you wouldn't want all traffic to go out. There are some traffics you will never want them to go out, so you will restrict it. But by default, when you spin up a new EC2 instance, by default it allows all outgoing or all outbound to exit. Okay, so if this provides value to you, please subscribe to the channel, like it, and share for others to know. If you have any questions, put it in the comment section and I'll be glad to answer all of them. See you in the next video.